Good evening all and welcome. Tonight's video has been graciously sponsored by Skillshare. This amazing platform offers a huge variety of online classes on literally anything you can think of, taught by the experts themselves. And with many of us now being stuck at home a hell of a lot more, it might be time to brush up on your existing skills or learn something entirely new. Be productive, make the most of your time like me. I've been learning Tai Chi from the Aquarius Academy, and I think I'm really starting to get somewhere now. If anyone else is interested, I highly recommend them. There are so many classes you can do, so go nuts and learn everything you possibly can. The first 1,000 people who click the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium, so hurry up because this won't last longer than a few days. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. About a year ago, I decided to make an impromptu journey to Poland in search of relatives I'd never met, but had only heard of via my ancestry research and an American cousin who reached out to me. As a lover of travel and languages, I was eager to go alone and see how I'd do. I learned some Polish in college and have been traveling worldwide since I was 21. Before going to the rural southeast of Poland, I made the most of the trip by first exploring Krakow, an amazing city, with buses and trains being the prominent mode of intercity transport. I lugged my suitcase the 40 minutes to the vast station to buy me a bus ticket to the next stop, ancestral homeland. Now, being a country girl growing up, I am still learning how to be adept at public transport and maneuvering people in streets. I'm also shy and not great at social skills, but normally that doesn't stop me. The main bus/train station at Krakow is also a large fancy mall, and I was delighted to find McCafe with free Wi-Fi. My phone service does not extend to Europe, so that's all the contact I had. I settled in and messaged a friend back home to my whereabouts. The McCafe had the aura of a Starbucks, but the cheap prices of McDonald's, another plus. It was relatively busy and open to the public view where I was sitting, at a one-person booth next to an outlet to charge my phone before the long journey. However, my sanctity was not to last. After a short time, an older, gruff-looking gentleman with a thick, tattered winter coat sauntered in and immediately headed my way. He seemed to be in some kind of construction work, as his coat was very warmly padded and dirty with the characteristic reflective yellow and orange colors. It did strike me as a bit strange, since this station/mall was more travelers and shoppers than blue-collar workers. As for him heading my way, I figured with the laptop he held out ahead of him that he was just looking for a plug, as I had been. Of course, mine was not the only outlet amid the moderately spacious cafe, but he chose to sit directly next to me, almost touching shoulders, and plugged into the second of two plugs I was using. Sometimes people don't have a sense of personal space. I guess this outlet was the closest to the entrance. I shook it off, and he proceeded to speak to me and gesture at his laptop. I got the sense that he needed some sort of technical assistance from me, a youth, and figured that would explain why he sat next to me. I helped him set up the laptop on his Wi-Fi in broken Polish, and he thanked me by kissing my hand emphatically and smiling like he'd won the lottery. I noticed an icon at the bottom of his screen showing he had a Ukrainian keyboard equipped, and it was confirmed with what I heard earlier of his accent. He kept looking my way even though he no longer needed assistance, and I pretended to be busy on my phone, even though my friend on the other end wasn't necessarily responding quickly. I didn't really want him to talk to me. He kept his laptop slightly turned my way intentionally, as if he wanted me to see what he was doing. He opened up Facebook and started a FaceTime call with a woman around his age or perhaps a little younger, and pointed the camera towards me to show her and said something I couldn't understand that well. I assumed he was telling her how I'd helped him out, but their conversation seemed strained, and she made a forced smile at me briefly before they began talking loudly at each other again. I tried to mind my own business, but it was awkward being in view of his FaceTime call and it being so loud that others in the cafe looked over at him. The call ended soon thereafter, and I thought he would leave. But instead, he closed his laptop and proceeded to question me. I tried my best to answer in broken Polish mixed with English, and he seemed to understand well enough. He was amicable, although dramatic, and every time I finally understood something he said and answered him satisfactorily, he would laugh and kiss my hand and not relinquish it. Now, before venturing to Poland, my cousin had warned me that the rural old-fashioned men may kiss a lady's hand in greeting. With this in the back of my mind, I wasn't sure if he was in the realm of cultural normality for the region or if it was too much. Being the socially awkward person that I am, I decided to let it go, especially considering I'd been traveling alone for 2 weeks at that point. I supposed some human-to-human interaction would not be totally unwelcome. However, his questions, despite the friendly smile he posed them with, were increasingly invasive, since he seemed, again, to not be one for respecting personal space. I chalked it up to him being too friendly, but innocent enough. He asked why I was here, and where I was from, and going to, what my phone number was, and if I needed something later in my travels, that he could return the favor I gave to him. That one sent me off. Even if he's ignorant to social norms and space, that one was odd even for an old-fashioned man. I didn't mind obliging him though, because my number would be useless in Europe anyway, and gave him an alias instead of the real name. During this conversation, he kept saying I didn't need to leave for the bus yet, and it morphed later into, I needn't go on the bus at all, I could stay a while with his family. He insisted that he would repay me for my help. All I did was click McCafe free Wi-Fi and accept the terms. It didn't seem like too much to warrant this much gratitude, but who knows with boomers. I mean, he managed to use FaceTime just fine. My thoughts were fluttering around in my head, and I kept declining and said my family would be waiting for me. A lie, we'd never met, and they didn't even know of my existence yet. But he said for me to just tell them I'd come later, and to stay with him and his family instead. He also insisted on buying me a coffee, even though I hadn't finished the one I bought myself, and caused a fuss when I kept saying no. Mind you, this whole time he was still leaning towards me and holding onto my hand tightly. I was getting sweaty. Because of it, it was hard for me to try and collect my things and leave, or even shoot a message to my friend. What do I do? He called to the cashier at the counter, and about 10 feet away, asked for him to bring me a coffee. The cashier replied that the man may walk up to the register and place his order, but he refused twice. His friendly demeanor when speaking to me was gone, as he nearly yelled at the cashier to meet his demands and threw the cash onto the table for him. The man turned back to me and was smiley again, and insisted I stayed to drink the coffee with him and chat. He knew when my bus was leaving, and where it was going. He knew because he'd looked over my shoulder at my ticket when it was resting on the table next to my phone. I had it out to memorize the pickup location and time, and again, my hand held hostage in his, I didn't have a chance to move the ticket out of sight. He was blatantly stalling me and still insisting on me going to see him and his family. I finally got upset, not wanting to miss the bus and waste my money on that ticket. Plus, I had a ride waiting for me, expecting my arrival at that particular time, and in my limited Polish, I told him just so. The people pleaser in me was torn, but ultimately the hostess who would be awaiting me had won out over the man glued to my side. Somehow he finally let up and nodded sadly when I said I must leave now. I gulped the burning hot coffee he bought just for show, and not look ungrateful or wasteful, and thanked him for buying it for me. He refused my thanks profusely and insisted he owed it to me, and he still had a hold of my hand. He kissed it again and again, holding it like lowly servants do in the cartoons to the lovely princess they're indebted to. I put up with it once more with the hope that it would soon be over. He pulled me closer as he did this and reached down my shoulders like he wanted a hug goodbye. and I put up with this too, despite all his rude insistence. It still felt like he was overly friendly, perhaps lonely, and felt bad just walking away. His sudden jerk of my arm, closer to him, slid me along the booth, closer to him, and he hugged me tightly. He kissed my cheek. Ugh. But when I thought he was letting go, he grabbed my face, forcefully with both his hands, and turned it into his, and he kissed me on the lips twice, desirously, as if he were a Casanova movie star and I his femme fatale. It was disgusting, and he did it in full view of the other customers sitting across the way. They'd thrown awkward glances our way throughout the entire encounter, since we were the only ones talking and laughing in the cafe. They especially had noticed his loud demands to the cashier. I was in too much shock to notice if they'd seen the last part, and I honestly didn't care. I had 5 minutes to reach the bus amid a huge bustling station that I'd never been to before. As soon as the stupid old man let go, I made an obligatory forced half smile and a goodbye, and escaped on shaky legs into the crowded walkway. I knew I'd missed the bus, but I had to leave the cafe anyway to escape. The next bus wasn't for 6 more hours, and the man was probably still there just inside the mall area, and I didn't want him to spot me again. I waited at a different fast food place, closest to the buses, and in sight of a police officer standing at the mall entrance just in case I saw him once more. Being in a different time zone from my family and friends, I felt I had no one to comfort me, and made the mistake of frantically posting on Reddit in another sub. I got yelled at more security for resting my shaking feet of the bar on the chair beside me, and broke into tears. I only told my one night owl friend from earlier when she came online later, and as I didn't want to worry my parents or boyfriend about me traveling alone. To this day, they don't know what happened. Who knows what he was really up to? Or maybe he really did want me to meet his family. I'll never know. I felt so gross and disgusting physically that I covered my mouth and tongue with hand sanitizer that I had on me. This was in February 2020, but coronavirus had yet to be confirmed in Poland. Mentally and emotionally, I was exhausted and distraught, of course, because I mostly felt stupid for letting things get that far. So scruffy old man, let's never meet again. And took a new position as a high school librarian. There was a little snack bar run by the cafeteria workers in the student center. Bill was the guy who manned the register for the snack bar. He was a short man in his late 50s, always had a smile for anyone who came to visit, and he really loved it when the adults of the building came by to get food or drinks, and would start a conversation with anyone who would stop to talk. He seemed sad and lonely. Over the first few months of stopping by there for my morning tea, he would always ask me questions. I was in a serious relationship at the time, and had been with my partner for 6 years, and we had a child together. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. I never got any weird vibes from him. He seemed like a sweet father/grandfather type figure. Over the summer between my first year of working and my second, my boyfriend and I broke up. I didn't talk about it at work when I could help it. It was painful to talk about because we'd been together for so long and had a child. I was trying to date online. I was on the main ones: Facebook dating, Tinder, Plenty of Fish, and Bumble. I live in a pretty small town, so the same men were on the same apps, and went on a few dates, but overall the entire process was a disaster. I only stayed on the apps for that first full semester of my second year, and then deleted them all to remain single. During this time, Bill's attention started to change. He would get very excited when I came down to get my morning drink. He knew about my breakup and would ask me how dating was going. I didn't recall telling him I was single, but I assumed that I must have let it slip at some point in conversation. I would come back in the mornings and tell him about all of my terrible dates, and I remember telling him that I was giving up on dating. He tried to hold my hand and comfort me, but I immediately jerked my hand off, and I told him I was fine with my life and that I wasn't going to date again until I was happy with just myself. Each morning that I went back, I noticed that he kept trying to find excuses to touch me. I had hair on my clothes, or that he needed to fix the alignment of my jacket, and I started to get creeped out by his attention. I stopped going down to get drinks and told him I didn't have the time in the morning anymore because the library was getting more kids needing me to check out books before school started. Since I wasn't coming down to see him, he started coming down to see me, and it started by just bringing me tea. If I wasn't at my desk, he would leave it for me to find. At first, I didn't mind too much. Things just appeared, and I didn't have to fake a smile when he was near. After a few weeks, it stopped being just tea. He started to bring me food too. "We just got a shipment of oranges," he said. "I picked out the best ones for you. I know how much you like them." The gifts became bigger and bigger, until he was bringing me full meals from the cafeteria. I started trying to think how I could get this to stop while also being polite. I had to be nice, right? Over time, I couldn't even eat the food. I would just give it away or trash it the moment he left the room. The next time he came down with his arms filled with free food for me, I told him that I didn't want him to bring me anything because I was on a diet and I was bringing my own food to school. "You're perfect just the way you are," he said with a big smile, and I replied with a thank you. Why do I feel the need to be nice to creepy people? When he would come in and I wasn't at my desk, I would duck down and hide until he left. The students started to ask what was going on. I'm a grown woman, the person in charge of these students, and I'm hiding on the floor behind a stack of books to avoid talking to him. The students even said that they don't like him, and they had nicknamed him the Troll. It was such a fitting name. Over time, he understood that I didn't want any more food from him. I had a month of glorious silence with no visits, just awkward waves in the hallway if I passed, and my second year as a librarian ended. When the third year started back up, I had a lovely summer without any thoughts of him. I walked into the library on my first day with a present on my desk. I opened the package, and it was a coffee tumbler with a gift card to Starbucks. No name or card to say who gave it to me. I wasn't sure if it was him, so I went down to ask, and he said he wanted to buy me something special and to have my school year start with a smile. I accepted the gift and thanked him. I'm not saying no to some free drinks, but I shouldn't have taken it, and I know that now. At least once a week he would bring me something, and each gift got more expensive and I became increasingly more uncomfortable. By October I told him to stop, not to bring me anything. Do not buy me anything, it makes me uncomfortable, and I will not be buying anything for you in return. But he didn't listen. He kept bringing me things I knew he couldn't afford on this cafeteria worker's salary, and told him to just stop. I started to get angry. I was no longer smiling or saying thank you, and I realized my biggest mistake now. I took the gifts. I took them because I don't have a lot of money, and the gifts were truly all things I needed or loved, and really, I should have never accepted them. I started to confide in other workers of how uncomfortable the whole situation made me. Most of them would just reply, "He's single and really nice and obviously likes you. I know he's older, but you should just give him a chance." I did not. With each unwanted gift, he would say, "I know you told me no more gifts, but I had to get this for you." On Valentine's Day of my third year working at this school, a giant gift basket was on my desk. I brought the entire thing back to him. I told him to take it back and that it was just too much. I guessed that it was about $150 for the entire thing. I told him to keep it. He said that if I took this, it would be the last gift, and he promised. I took it and made him repeat it again, that it was the final gift. I didn't get a chance to test this. By the next month, the entire country shut down for COVID, and I had to still be on campus to work despite all the students being remote. In April, he came to my desk with a goodbye gift. He was quitting his job because they could not pay any of the cafeteria workers without students on campus, and was moving away. I cried with him, partly because I'm empathetic when others cry, and mostly from relief. He was leaving, and I never had to speak to him again. The next day I had a friend request and a message from him on Facebook. I didn't respond or accept, but it did fill in some gaps from my knowledge. He had a car as his profile picture, and I remember the picture from all my online dating apps. That's why his demeanor changed. He saw me on all the dating apps and I had ignored him. For 8 months I thought it was over and I didn't think about him. School started back up this past August with students back on campus. It was a relief not to worry about seeing him or finding random things on my desk, but in October my work phone started ringing. I was so busy I didn't answer, and the person called 5 times, and when I finally answered, thinking it was a very urgent parent, it was the creepy troll Bill. He had to talk to me. He was in love with me, and he spent every day thinking about me, and oh, by the way, he is married with grandchildren. Guess who's ready to leave his wife for me? Crazy troll Bill. He kept me on my work phone for 45 minutes and I listened. I was nice. In hindsight, I have no idea why I kept talking to him. I told him I wasn't interested in him in that way. He begged to be friends and I said fine. He asked me to accept his friend request and I did, and he tried messaging me the next day but I left it on read. 2 weeks later I get a message from the front office that a representative from the company needs to talk to me. I rarely get sales reps coming in person, especially after COVID, so I go up front and it's the troll in a suit, with large bags under his arms. The secretary thought he must have been a regular because she recognized him but couldn't place him where. He asks to come in and to talk to me, but with COVID and safety rules no one was allowed in. I go outside in the cold and speak to him. He explained he just wanted to drop off a few gifts for me, and proceeds to take out each item from the bag and tells me where he was and how it reminded him of me, and why I had to have it. He brought things for my kid, nowhere close to what he needs for his age, and I'm panicking, my stomach hurts, and I feel like I'm trapped, but outwardly I'm polite and nice. He asks to hold my hand while he reads the poem he wrote for me, but I refuse and move as far away as I can manage. The poem he reads references a picture of me. He has the picture printed out, and he said it's his favorite. And I'm 14 years old in the picture. How far back did he go on my Facebook? And this man used to work in our high school? I tell him again I don't want to have anything to do with him, and he says that that's okay, that he just needs to be near me, and that he'll take any attention that I was willing to give him, and he just needed to be in my life. He goes in for a hug, but I try to get away, and I'm trapped between a tree and a bench. With his height, his face is buried in my breast and his hand tries to sneak under my shirt, and I can hear him try to smell my hair, and I'm instantly sick. I sent him a Facebook message the moment I'm back in school. This time, finally, I am not nice and tell him, no more gifts, period, none. This is a matter of consent, and I do not consent any more gifts. You say you care about me, but you do not respect my wishes. No more gifts. And after he responded and I was confident that he actually understood my words, I blocked him and changed the setting on my profile to make it harder to find. In November, a box arrived at the school, a subscription box that will be sent every month. There isn't a name who it's from, but I know who sent it. So I went to speak with the police on campus, but guess what? Not much they can do since I don't have proof that it's from Bill. I've called the company, but they cannot tell me who the account holder is, and the school is aware of the situation. They will hopefully remember him, if he ever tries to come back. The day before my birthday, he called my work phone 4 times. On my birthday, he called 5 more times, and I didn't answer. Yesterday, the second package arrived at the school with my name on it and the school address. I really hope this saga's over, but it might not be. I make sure I'm not followed when I leave work, but I do not have any clue what kind of car he drives. I have a special way I drive home now, where everything is single lanes, hopefully making it easier if I'm followed. I always check the caller ID before I answer my work phone, and I'm afraid of anyone who expresses an interest in me now because crushes are not cute anymore. I wait for more things to be delivered on campus, and I live in a constant state of panic because what if he meant it? What if he has to be a part of my life, whether I like it or not? So to Bill, the creepy troll, let's never meet again. When I was a young chick, I worked for Starbucks for a while. Our store was in the worst part of town, in a retail park. The area consisted of council flats where the local council placed druggies, ex-cons, and people on various benefits, so although we had some nice customers who were there for a shopping spree, there were quite a few shady people too. A guy came in and acted like a regular, asking every girl about how we were, and we all had name tags. He was nice and chatty, but made our skin crawl. But the other girls loved him, and the guy started to come in daily. He usually came around 1 p.m. and stayed until 11 p.m, so when we closed. And sometimes, he was very pushy about staying even after closing. He always insisted on helping bringing in the outside furniture and stuff. Some managers and I were cautious, especially since we couldn't have anyone in this store after closing. He then started to pretty much groom girls, asking if they were single, then if they had boyfriends, favorite sex positions. Yeah. The youngest girl was 16. Mind you, I grew up with narcissistic parents, so I learned how to read people very early. I've always been interested in psychology and had studied it for a few years, and this guy irked me from day one. But I was nice to him because I'm very passionate about not starving to death, so I needed the job. One day he started to tell me that he had a fight with his parents and that they threw him out. He looked very sad and told me that he needs to sleep in his van, a white, unmarked van. However, since he knew I'm closing that day, he'd love to take me home with his car because it's not the nicest neighborhood. I almost laughed. This was such a textbook way to abduct young women. He was doing everything just as my lecturers had said a serial killer/rapist would do. Sadly for him, I'm not a normal girl. Thanks to my rather cruel upbringing, I scored extremely high on the psychopathy test. I'm psycho by nature, as I was informed. I'm not one though. I love cats. I just have to tell him no once without my fake smile for him to notice that I'm not prey. Then he moved on to another girl, and I notified the manager about his creepy behavior in order to protect our younger girlies. One of them was sweet, innocent, and oh so naive. The creepy guy targeted her after my next few shifts, and my shift leader also laughed in his face. He told this young girl his sob story and expected empathy, which he got, and she agreed to be taken home by him, and she even offered him to sleep on her couch. Fortunately, my manager was a mama hen type of woman, and she firmly told her young barista to be more careful around strangers, and that she would be going home with her. Also, the creepy guy was then banned from the store. The manager notified security around the park, and I'm afraid I won't have a happy ending to this story. All I know is that the police were later involved somehow, and he vanished from the area. So whoever you are, creepy Starbucks guy, let's not meet again. Once upon a time I worked at Starbucks. While I've had many experiences that could certainly be deemed horrific, this is the one I'd like to share with you. When this happened, I was an assistant manager, so I often worked the front register. For a little context, I'm a religious person and wear a James Avery necklace across my neck. On this particular day, I was working the front when a customer I'd never seen came in. No biggie. We obviously saw all kind of folks. This guy was older, probably mid-60s or so, wearing a blue polo, shorts, and flip-flops. He looked normal. I'm a very customer service-oriented person, so I'd always chat up my customers, and this was no different. As he's about to walk away, he points to my necklace and says, "What's that? Some kind of pagan symbol?" "Oh, it's a filigree cross, and it has my life verse on the back." He nods understandingly and in approval and goes, "Now, you know there's only one version of the Bible that's worth a damn, right? Which one is it?" I know what he's getting at, although I'm annoyed at him being crass, so I say, "I guess you're referring to the King James version." He nods in approval, reaches out to shake my hand, and I have no problem shaking hands or anything like that, so I shake his hand and he pats it into a nice to meet you kind of way. And before I know what's happening, he raises my hand to his mouth. I thought he was going to kiss it, which would be customary for his age. No. He makes eye contact with me and proceeds to full-on lick my hand. I am so stunned and disgusted I don't even know what to say, and after what feels like an eternity, he drops my hand and saunters off to get his coffee. I let my partners know via the headset what happened, and that I was going to be in the back for a while, washing my hand and vomiting. We were all dumbfounded and couldn't believe what happened. You know what's funny? Usually when I told this story, at least one person would ask, "Did you have caramel on your hand and something?" Like that would make it acceptable. Anyway, Mr. Licky, let's never meet. When I was in the 7th grade, I wasn't stupid. I knew when someone was watching me, and I sure wasn't ugly. I was in shape from playing soccer and going to the gym to stay in shape. I wish I loved myself a bit more back then, but that's besides the point. I was very obviously underage because my face looked 10 and I wore a backpack. Plus, my school was directly next to the Starbucks where this creep worked. Since I was in a bad place back then, I kept several journal entries about my encounter with this man that can help me piece together some details and timelines of the event. But for now, let's begin. I was 12, and soon to be 13 in about 4 months. I was brand new to the area, and unlike my old school, my new school wouldn't let students in early. This was awful because school started at 8:40, and my mum would drop me off on her way to work at 7:10. It was Texas, and very humid and hot most days or pouring down with rain, and to avoid sitting outside in the awful weather, I'd have my mum drop me off at the Starbucks directly next to my school. So many middle schoolers would be there, and even some elementary schoolers, because the elementary school was connected to my middle school by a gate. So if you saw a young girl with a backpack, it was extremely obvious the girl wasn't legal. I've always been a very awkward person in new environments, so the first day my mum dropped me off at Starbucks, I was so embarrassed about filling up a seat inside that a paying customer could use, and I ended up sitting outside in the sweltering heat for an hour. I regret my decision so much to this day, because the creep had seen me out there all by myself and realized I was an easy target. He came outside and started talking to me and complimenting my long hair and beautiful face. When he asked for my name, I told him that I wasn't comfortable giving it out. After that, he made it his mission to find out my name. In the days following, I grew comfortable enough to go inside and find myself a seat. The first journal entry I wrote goes that the new school is too new and too weird. Since I first sat at Starbucks before school, the worker won't leave me alone, and that he'd been making me free drinks and randomly talking to me. I felt guilty and sick, like he was hitting on me in a way. Today he sang about me to the tune of his stupid music. When this place was busy, I snuck out. Alright, so I remember this. I walked inside the cafe and he was mopping/sweeping up a mess, and he was obviously in control of the audio because some songs I had never heard started playing. He saw me enter and began to sing, badly, about what I was wearing at the time and describing my long hair like I was Rapunzel. He had already made my usual drink and handed it to me as a few strangers watched. He knew my schedule like clockwork. Normally I sat in the corner seat that faced the register, but today I sat with my back to it so that he couldn't see my face, explaining what I meant by feeling guilty. I didn't like to accept free things from anyone, and I grew up being called spoiled by my older sister, so I grew used to telling everyone no when they offered things to me because my sister would get jealous. This is the next entry I have about him. Today was terrible. I got dropped off earlier than usual, and I was begging the worker wasn't there. But he was. He kept calling me my name, which I never told him, and he pronounces it as Jacotta. He was giving me a drink to give to my teacher, which I hate, and he also told him by name in the first place. The reason he was giving him the drink was because he told him my name. I gave him the drink back and left. So the day before I was sitting in Starbucks, and my social studies teacher walked in wearing his lanyard and ID. This creep had been asking other teachers before about my identity, but none of them taught me and didn't know it. Well, obviously my social studies teacher would, since he taught me. And after the work had made my teachers drink, he pointed at me and asked my name. Dakota, he said, and then left. The next day I grabbed my drink and waited the hour for class to start. As I'm leaving, the creep calls out my name, which he misheard, and I go to the counter to see what he wants. He pushes a big, hot drink towards me, and I remember being very confused about why he made me 2 drinks since I already had 1. Anyway, I liked them cold, not hot, since it was still summer. When I asked him what it was for, he told me it was to give to my teacher since he was kind enough to give my name away. I was frazzled. I gave him the drink back and left. I am glad I had written it down in my journal because my brain created a fake memory of walking down the hallway and giving my teacher the drink, which was obviously not the case. The next entry goes something like this. We all have that person we'll do anything for. Hannah. We all have that person who makes us question our sanity. My friends. We all have that person we'd never admit to ourselves we're scared of. The Starbucks worker. A few weeks later, the next entry of him goes something like this. I saw the creepy worker after school. He was outside the Starbucks talking to 2 sitting smoking ladies, standing over them and smiling. The girls had kids, and I was near the window and I couldn't stop looking at him. I didn't want him to see me. He's creepy, and I kept my hood up. This was the last of my entries, but the year I was in 8th, I still saw him frequently in passing. I knew he didn't work Wednesdays, so I would only enter Starbucks if it was Wednesday. Some other things to note. He treated me special and no one else. Once again, he knew I was a minor, and he'd frequently tell me I was beautiful. He once asked me if I wanted to know his name, but he wasn't wearing a name tag, and I wasn't about to say yes, because it would have given him the wrong message. Maybe he'd have thought I was attracted to him. I wanted to know it, because I wanted to warn others of him. He gave me so many free drinks, I knew damn well he was paying for them out of pocket, and he spent at least $100 on me to give me those drinks. Nonetheless, creepy guy who obsesses over a young girl, obviously underage, let's not meet again. I just received my library science degree. I was pretty excited to get a job as a librarian and went on my way to a job interview as a newly minted LIS graduate. So I apply and got a job at a public library an hour away, and hear back from a man who tells me he'd like to talk about a job. I feel good about this, and he says he'd like to meet me down the street from the library. That's odd, but maybe it's a very casual library. So I decide to find the address, and it ends up being a coffee shop. I get out of my car and walk into the coffee shop where I see an older man in a nice coat sitting on the couch. He seems pretty laid back. Now I'm starting to think this is odd. If I were a young female, I'd hightail it out of there. However, I'm a late 20s male and decide to go and talk to the guy waving me over. Looking back, even being who I was, maybe I shouldn't have. He asks if I'm Alec, and I tell him yes. So I sit down and he sits on literally the couch across from me, and I give him my usual speech about what I can offer him for the library. He says that sounds interesting, same old, and all the job interviews are fairly polite. However, this is odd, and I can feel it. It seems more like a date than an interview. He then tells me about the job, which sounds very made up, writing press releases for the library. And after that, he says he'll email me about the job, but not before telling me that he should write a book suggestion from me. Well, he likes mysteries, and I tell him I like Devonport novels by John Sandford, and he gives me a creepy smile and says that sounds great. When I get home, as I was living with my parents at the time, as the job search went on, my dad pokes holes in the job he gave me. He says why couldn't they just get someone already on staff to write a press release? My dad is right. The whole thing sounded fishy. Well, I never got that email, nor heard or even saw the man around again. Nor do I have any proof from the library website he's even associated with them. I would say let's not meet, but I'm not even sure what exactly this whole thing was in the first place. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I just need to say, ladies and even guys, you don't owe people anything. You don't owe them politeness or anything like that. And if someone's creeping you out or making you feel uncomfortable, you just say, I'm sorry, you're making me feel uncomfortable. I don't like this. And then you just go. You just get out of that situation. So many people, I've read so many stories, as you can imagine. So many stories. And I read it a lot. But you have the power to say no. And I appreciate that it is contextual. There are certain situations where perhaps it's not that easy. But you can say no. You can leave. You can make a fuss. You can scream. And sure, everyone's going to look at you, but it will send a message. Especially in a crowded place. So, bear it in mind, guys. For your safety. Anyway, with that out of the way, I want to thank everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. This was a subscriber suggested video topic, Starbucks coffee shop stories. Yeah, not the easiest one to find, but I thought it was fun to do something a little bit different, and I hope that you guys appreciated it all the same. Thank you to all the beta testers who applied, and now that a large number of members and patrons have gone ahead and had their first play at the app, we've decided that if anyone else wants to have a go, download the app, be a beta tester, you guys can email me as well. So go ahead and do that if you want to test it out. I know that most people actually don't make it to the end, so maybe tomorrow I'll say at the start. All right then, guys. Thank you. Thank you everyone for listening. And yeah, stay awesome. Stay safe. Don't take crap from anyone because you all deserve better. I'll see you in the next one.